The Abyss Order are one of the more inexplicable enemy groups we have faced in Genshin Impact. In most of the story, the Abyss are involved in one way or another, always working in the shadows towards a goal that has yet to be revealed. This mysterious group is touted by most in Devat as extremely dangerous, yet despite their supposed threat, we know nothing about their members. As of the current storyline, we have only ever encountered a handful of the Abyss forces, with the Abyss Lectors, Heralds, and Mages. But what exactly are these Heralds and Lectors? Did they used to be humans, or are they something else entirely? Before we explore the soldiers of the Abyss Order, if you want to see more Genshin Impact content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Before we can attempt to answer the question of what the Abyss Heralds really are, we need to understand the hierarchy of the Abyss and the history of its formation. During the 3.5 Archon quest, Caribert, we learned that the Abyss Order was initially formed by a noble from the nation of Khaenri'ah. This occurred after the Cataclysm took place, with most people originating from Khaenri'ah either cursed with immortality or cursed to become Hilichurls, depending on the nobility of their blood. In the quest, Clothar Alberic, along with the Traveler's sibling, had encountered a being thought to be associated with the Abyss, the Sinner. This being granted a portion of its abyssal powers to both Clothar and his son, Caribert. After witnessing its power and the ability for abyssal energies to revert his son, who is a Hilichurl, back to a more sentient state, Clothar Alberic would go on to form the Abyss Order, seemingly to continue the efforts of the nation of Khaenri'ah in finding and harnessing the power of the Abyss. The structure of the Order in the modern day is largely unknown. Despite traveling through 4 nations and disrupting their plans on several occasions, we have only ever met 3 variants of their supposed membership: the Abyss Mages, Heralds, and Lectors. The Mages are often seen conscripting and coordinating the Hilichurls, while the Heralds and Lectors seem to hold higher positions and are entrusted with more difficult tasks. We also often see the Abyss Heralds accompanying the Traveler's sibling, almost like a bodyguard, but they are also often working on their own as well. Most are quite intelligent and capable of deception, strategic thinking, and even speech, with examples like the Flame Abyss Lector who disguised itself as Enjo in order to trick the Traveler. So as far as we know, at the top of their hierarchy likely sits the founder, originally Clothar Alberic, followed by the title of Princess held by the Traveler's sibling, and after that are all the Abyss Lectors, Heralds, and Mages. Putting aside the leader and the Princess or Prince, in total we have met 4 different variations of these Lectors and Heralds. The Hydro Abyss Herald, Wicked Torrents, was first seen alongside the Traveler's sibling during the Stolen Archon statue quest. It was seen later in Sumeru, but it's unclear if it's the same Herald. The Pyro Abyss Lector was seen in Enkanomiya as it took on the name of Enjo in order to gain information from the Traveler. The Electro Abyss Lector, Violet Lightning, was encountered in the Spiral Abyss. And finally, the most recent is the Cryo Abyss Herald, Frostfall, who was encountered guarding the entrance to the Chamber of the Sinner. Now, figuring out what exactly the Abyss Lectors and Heralds are is rather tricky. You see, because we know that the Alberic family are the founders and likely constitute some of the members of the Abyss Order, we could assume that these heralds are just ex-Khaenri'ah nobles who have embraced the power of the Abyss. However, during the flashback in the Caribert quest, we also encountered a Cryo Herald guarding the door to the Sinner. Since this event occurred prior to the formation of the Abyss Order, it implies that the heralds have been around even before the Abyss Order was officially created. Because of this, it could be that the heralds are beings of the Abyss itself. This isn't too difficult to imagine, as beings from the elemental realm are able to manifest themselves in the human realm, with one good example being the dragons. On top of that, certain enemy groups like the Rift Wolves are said to originate directly from the Abyss, making it likely that other beings exist as well. The Abyss is often described as the realm of void, and while that evokes imagery of an empty and desolate place, it's likely not the case. Even Tartaglia, who has visited the Abyss, spent time fighting monsters there and training, indicating the realm isn't one devoid of all life. An alternative possibility is that one can become an Abyss Herald or Lector. Perhaps these beings are those that have been changed by the Abyss or granted a portion of its power. It could be likely that when the Abyss Order was formed and other members joined, namely the Alberic clan, The Abyss was able to change them into the Heralds and Lectors we see. Think of how visions allow humans to manipulate the elements and eventually allow them to ascend to godhood. Perhaps a similar method is also employed here, with people granted the power of the Abyss and perhaps in time allow them to ascend to a different form altogether. This might make the Lectors and Heralds just beings empowered by abyssal energy, which causes them to change. The final possibility is that the Abyss really doesn't have any living creatures, but is itself sentient, and the Lectors, Heralds, and whatever else that spawns from it are just extensions of itself. There are several lore pieces that could potentially allude to this idea. Firstly is the introduction of the Sinner, who was a being that seemed to have existed before the formation of the Abyss Order and thus stands above the Order itself. Aside from that, in the Hakushin Ring lore description, Kitsune Saigu referred to an entity that seems to represent the Abyss itself, and was described as a being that was sentient and aware of Kitsune Saigu. These stories seem to imply that the Abyss has a will of its own and could lend some credence to this idea, but it's just a theory. What's more likely is that perhaps this being, or the Abyss, has partnered with the Alberic clan to overthrow the gods of Celestia, in exchange for the power it can grant them and the promise of removing their curses. So maybe the Abyss Order is made up of two different groups, one from the Abyss and one from the human realm, like the Alberic clan. Now, unfortunately, there isn't much else to go on given the fact that we know so little of this faction. They appear as intelligent and dangerous adversaries, but for now remain largely a mystery. As such, don't read too much into these theories, as I'm just guessing at what potential origins these heralds and lectors might have, and as the story evolves, their origins could very well change. It's difficult to guess when we will see the next Abyss related quest, so for now, we'll just have to wait. That does it for this video though, and if you enjoyed it, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. As usual, have a nice day.